Hi, welcome back to my channel, The Planted Carly Flower. I'm Carly, and today we're going to be talking about how I choose what substrate I want to keep my plants in. Stay tuned and we'll get right into it.
I want to be daring, baby, dance the night away. I let my hair down if I want. Don't you just get tired chasing fame and being pretty all the time?
Okay guys, how I choose a substrate. Now, I wouldn't be lying if I said it was easy to come up with this video, because this video is actually a little bit more of a difficult one for me, because a lot of why I choose what substrate just comes from knowing my plants, knowing the type of plant I have, and knowing through everything I've gone through with having Hoyas what works best for me. So it's a lot of intuition and a lot of just knowing from past failures and past mistakes. So it's hard to explain that sometimes, because it makes a whole ton of sense in my head, but I can understand why it doesn't make sense to other people, because they haven't experienced the things that I've experienced with my personal collection or in my environment. I'm gonna try and break this down as best as I can, and if you need further clarification on anything, don't be afraid to hit me up in the comment section, because keep in mind as well, this is my experience and how I choose my substrate. If you would have made a different choice in a situation, that doesn't mean it's the wrong choice, because it's not the same as mine. There are tons of substrates that you can keep your plants in. There are reasons why I choose the substrates that I choose and why I try to stay away from certain substrates. But overall, there is no wrong way to do things if it works for you. So don't be offended if I choose a substrate that you would not have chosen or that you think is not the right substrate, because it is the right substrate for me. So ultimately, that's what it boils down to. Let's start with my options in my home for substrate. This is particularly for Hoyas. I do have other plants in different substrates that I'm not going to go into because I'm talking about Hoyas today. So how I choose a substrate for my Hoyas. I choose between pon, LECA, or soil. For the most part, that is what I choose for my Hoyas. The majority of my Hoyas are in those three substrates, unless they are in recovery for some reason. Sometimes I tend to choose moss for recovery, but that's a different video. I prefer pon for long-term Hoya care for most Hoyas. It's easy for me. I put them in the self-watering pots that look like this white one here behind me. Go ahead and... As a matter of fact, this is my Hoya Vitellinoides. It's beautiful, isn't it? And she's in pon in a self-watering pot. As you can see, she's got her water in there. And this is mostly what I choose for my Hoyas. I can fill this water reservoir up and leave her alone, and I won't have to touch her for 2 to 3 weeks. Now, I don't leave them that long because they need care and they need fresh water and all that. But if I knew if I had to go on vacation for 2 weeks, my plants would be fine. I prefer pon, like I said, for long-term use. It's easy to flush. It's really good for, I feel, for the smaller, thinner roots that Hoyas tend to have. They can grow in between the pon, and it's a bit of a smaller substrate, so I feel like it works really well with their thinner roots. I find that I don't have to repot very often, and I just really prefer the pon. They have less chance of pests, which is one of the biggest reasons why I tried a non-organic substrate to begin with, was to lessen my chance of pests. And I also find with the self-watering pots, since they are not opaque, I get very little to no algae in my reservoirs, with them being in a very humid environment and bright light. If you are interested in those pots or the substrate mix for myself, do it by yourself pon, all of that is in my link tree under my Amazon storefront. You can look in plant substrates, or you can look in plant supplies or pots, and they will all be there for you if you want to check out the links. But pon is my first choice for long-term plant care for all the reasons I just mentioned. I also feel like pon And LECA, in all fairness, holds a certain amount of humidity within the substrate, which obviously the roots and the Hoya are gonna love. They also create a little mini like pebble rock experience for the Hoya. So even if your Hoya is not in a Millsbo cabinet or a greenhouse, or you don't live in a humid environment, it's still gonna get that little tiny boost of humidity. I'm not saying it's gonna be 85% around your plant, but it's gonna be a couple percentages higher than just your room, because you have that little humid environment right there in the substrate. It's almost like the same effect as giving it a little pebble tray. So for those reasons, I find pond to be an absolutely lovely long-term substrate for plants, and I highly recommend anybody try it. I know that there is the Choose a Pond brand that it's a little hard to get a hold of because they're constantly sold out, but I do have some plants in that as well because I was able to get a hold of a bag, and I find that it works just the same as my DIY. So really, if all you can get a hold of is the DIY, it works the same. I do have to fertilize on my own because of the way I make my DIY pond. I do not add any slow release fertilizer, although you absolutely could add slow release fertilizer to pond. I wouldn't recommend adding it to LECA since it's so much smaller than the LECA. I don't think it would work out very well. I think all your slow release fertilizer would fall to the bottom of your pot and you would just have LECA all around the roots, which does you no good. But the pond, it would absolutely work if you wanted to add some slow release fertilizer pellets. But pond, those are all the reasons why I would choose pond. Now, the type of Hoyas I would choose to put in pond are Hoyas with a woodier, more substantial, like barky stem, because I feel like those types of Hoyas do very well in a water type substrate. The type of Hoya I would not choose to put in pond is anything with a soft, fuzzy stem. Like my Hoya affinis, I would not put that in a watery substrate like pond. I would put that in soil. Now for LECA, I started out with LECA. I started out with LECA when I was looking for an inorganic substrate because I wanted to lessen my chance of pests. Fungus gnats are my most hated and vile enemy, as anybody who's been on this channel for a little while knows at this point, and I hate them. So I wanted to find something they could not live in. So I tried LECA first, and I did really like LECA. Because the substrate is not as dense, the water tends to move up through it faster, and then therefore tends to evaporate faster for me. I live in an absolutely very, very dry climate. I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We are constantly in drought. It rains maybe a handful of times here a year. I live in a straight up desert. There are cactus and yuccas outside my door. So the LECA just, the water reservoir dried up too fast for me. I found that I was having to give them a lot more care than I would have liked to have given them. So that is why I tried pond, and pond absolutely stays wetter with the reservoir for longer than LECA. I have to give it a lot less care. So LECA is absolutely a beautiful inorganic substrate if you're looking for something along those lines. I do prefer to root in LECA. I did do a rooting Hoyas video, so I won't get too much into that. You can check out that video if you're interested. I will link it down below. But LECA is another great inorganic substrate. The type of plant that I would put in LECA would be, again, barkier, woodier stemmed Hoyas, carnosas, vitellinoids. I have my rotundiflora was in LECA for a long time. My Hoya, it's verticulata now, but it used to be Parasitica Splash, is in LECA and has been in LECA since I rooted it. I just haven't found a reason to change it because it's happy. But I do have to fill that water reservoir up, even in my Millsbo cabinet where it's humid, every couple days because it just runs out. Nowadays, I do put my LECA in the same setup as my pond. It still does evaporate faster, but it does last longer than if I had it in any other kind of setup. So my first choice is always going to be pond. My second choice is always going to be LECA. I do have soil Hoyas, believe it or not, and there are a few reasons why I would choose soil over LECA or pond. One of them being, if a plant comes to me ready to be in soil, like it was in soil previously or it's already potted, and I just don't feel like moving it, I'll leave it in soil. Like, honestly, it's laziness, I know that, but I will just leave it in soil because I don't feel like rinsing pond and all that right now. I also, if it comes to me in soil and I'm not familiar with the plant, I have not had one like it, I don't know much about the Hoya. If I've heard that it's finicky in any way, I will typically leave it in the substrate it was sent to me in. I have a Waymanii Borneo that is in soil and will remain in soil until I have a reason to move it, because I know those plants are finicky and I'm not trying to screw with it and leave it. I want it to live its best life, and it came to me in soil, so it's going to stay in soil. I tend to use terracotta with my soil Hoyas because I don't want the soil to hold on to moisture too long. Unlike with pond and LECA, which has a ton of air gaps and a ton of little nooks and crannies for oxygen, soil isn't always like that. Especially if you didn't make the soil substrate yourself, you're not 100% what's in it. You can definitely amend your soil, and I highly recommend it. My soil amendment for my Hoya plants is super extra, so don't feel like you have to do everything I'm about to mention. But you can just add a ton of perlite to potted soil mix and be fine. But Hoyas are epiphytes. They climb up trees in the wild, so I tried to mimic that as much as possible with my soil plants. I put orchid bark and cocoa chips. I put horticultural charcoal, and I put perlite or pumice. I prefer pumice. To give it lots of aeration so that the roots are not smothered by the soil. You need to have oxygen pockets in your substrate for roots to flourish, and terracotta soaks up that extra moisture so that they're not sitting there soggy. So I tend to use terracotta, but you can use ceramic or plastic and just adjust your watering schedule as you like. I like to put Hoyas with fuzzier, softer stems like my Hoya finis in soil, and I find that works really well. So that is a few reasons why I choose the substrates I choose, and that is a few reasons why I choose the plants for the substrates that I do choose for the substrates, I think. Does that make sense? I hope so. If you have any questions, absolutely leave them in the comment box down below. Don't forget to give this video a like and a thumbs up. And go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. We would love to have you be part of our family. My link tree and everything, if you're curious about any of the substrates I use, are down below. I will try to link my moss video and my soil mixture video down below. I also have videos on pond and LECA and how I use them. If you want something a little bit more in depth on those subjects, I will link those down below as well. I hope you guys have a good rest of your day and enjoy plenty of time with your plant babies today. Thank you. Bye-bye.